HFK presents 5 Minutes of History, and I'm your host, Terry Lynch. Raise the roof, everyone! Woo, 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 woo! Well, maybe not the roof. How about the debt ceiling? Because that's what we just did this week. The government decided to raise our debt ceiling. Well, I don't know if I want to celebrate that much because, after all, it seems like there was a lot of political posturing and partisan politics going on before they all came to an agreement, which is really the goal of our government, to compromise with each other and find out what best is in the best interest of our nation. But are we really looking out for the best interests of our nation when we follow political platforms? I don't know. Makes me think about our first president, George Washington, who on his farewell address addressed just that issue. You see, George was a really wise man and understood that whatever was done at the beginning of our country would be the foundation that everything would form on after that point. He said it was a precedent, everything the president did. So he's very cautious about what he did, and he warned others to be cautious themselves. In his farewell address, he had actually addressed two issues that were not talked about too often. One of them being, we have to make sure that we unite together as a nation, not just when times are tough, like when you're fighting a revolution, but beyond that. And he said, don't start getting too tied in to your geographical areas. He literally warned the North and the South to get along years before the Civil War. But what I'd really like to talk about, and I wish the people in Washington would listen to, is his other warning in this address. And it was the warning against political parties. George Washington predicted that if you joined a specific political party, eventually you'll be more concerned on your party's platform than on what's in the best interest for the people of the nation. Not just those in your own area, but the nation as a whole. Because you'll be split up into special interest groups, something he was very afraid of. And he saw this happening in his own cabinet. George Washington saw two of the greatest minds and finest leaders he knew of fight with each other and agree to disagree on everything just because they belonged to two political parties. One being Alexander Hamilton, who was a Federalist. I would hope so. He wrote the Federalist Papers. And the other, Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican, who were the Anti-Federalists. But they changed the name because Anti-Federalist didn't seem so nice. So they became Democratic Republicans. These two men were looking out for the best interest in our nation, but refused to believe the other side of the position because they were in opposing political parties, and literally spent time in their own homes running campaigns to discredit the other side because of the party they were in. And it had nothing to do with what was in the best interest of our country as a whole. Does this sound familiar? People worrying about where they are on their political platform as opposed to what's in the best interest of the nation? Yes, it does. It sounds very familiar, and it's repeated itself over and over again. And I think that's because not too many people have gone back and listened to that farewell address of one of the wisest men this nation ever had, George Washington, who predicted if we start paying attention to our political parties and not to the people of the nation, it could cause the country to not have the best interests in mind when governing. What a wise man that man was. Wouldn't you say? Yes, I'd say so too. Oh, I'm looking on the wall here, and you know what I've discovered? Not only the fact that we're in a different set, because we're moving on up, but it's time for trivia. And here's today's trivia. It has to do with our government's founding as well, and something that these people in Washington might not agree with today. When we were founding our country and forming the Constitution, the greatest leaders in the world, the greatest leaders, I should say, in our nation, came to Philadelphia, and they met in the Constitutional Convention, and they came up with a whole bunch of great ideas, and some of them weren't passed along. One idea came from Benjamin Franklin that, boy oh boy, I'd love to have seen pan out. Do you know what Benjamin Franklin thought? He thought that there should be a specific amount of money paid for each person who was in Congress, in the Senate, and in the executive branch. And do you know how much that was? Zero. Not a penny. He thought it would be an honor and a duty that all people should want to do, and that would be help rule our government. Because it was a bold new experiment, he thought you shouldn't get paid for this, it shouldn't be a job, it should be a privilege. Plus he realized that if you didn't have this as your job, you'd have to have some sort of income back home, and the laws you wrote would affect you, not others. Too bad Ben Franklin didn't win out on that level, huh? Could you imagine the politicians now writing laws that would actually affect them? But it sounds like I'm getting on my soapbox. If you'd like to know more about either one of those, I would suggest you pick up a book on the Constitutional Convention or take a look at a book on presidents. A lot of them have the farewell addresses or the inaugural addresses, and you can find out about George Washington's speech in there. Now, I'm just about running out of time, and as usual, I want to remind you, you can find us on our blogs or at our website, either historiesforkids.com or hfkpresents.com. And of course, you know how to find our videos because you're watching this right now. And a little added note to those of you colleges out there. We're gassing up the tour bus and we're getting ready for a constitutional convention, or should I say my tour of schools that like me to come out and talk on the Constitution. But I don't want you to forget, that's not the only time you can have me. I'm available year-round with many different characters. Two that seem to be very important this year coming up might be of an interest to you as well. One of them is Charles Dickens near the Christmas time, and another is none other than Edgar Allan Poe. So if you'd like a little something around Halloween and you don't want to have ghost stories, why don't you have a person that told a lot of unusual stories himself and is highly attached to the Halloween time itself, Edgar Allan Poe. But if you don't need those, you know I've got a lot of other characters. Check out our website and you'll find out. Now, that's about all the time I have today. I want to thank you for spending a few moments with me, and remember, you can like us on Facebook and we'll like you right back. This is